So I'm sure, as many of you guys know, a little game this week called Black Myth Wukong released. Okay, now I'm sure most of you guys out there are probably actually sick of hearing how good this game is, and you're sick of hearing everybody talk about it. That's not the point of today's video. It's going to be the background gameplay for today's video because it is the inspiration for today's discussion. Okay, while I was sinking a ton of hours into this game, I couldn't help but think, is the Souls-like genre oversaturated? I think it's a really interesting discussion because, when Black Myth Wukong first had gameplay reveals and all of that, there were people who were saying, like they were rolling their eyes, they're like, oh, another Souls-like, whatever, blah, 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 we're sick of this. And I think that's really interesting. Although the developers of this game did come out and say it's not a Souls-like, after sinking probably like 50 hours into this game, bro, I really do think that this is a Souls-like. You got the healing flasks, you got the checkpoints, you got boss fights. It's enough to be considered a Souls-like, in my opinion. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the discussion. Is Souls-like as a genre way too oversaturated? Let's talk about it. So, starting off, let's go ahead and talk about From Software. Alright, From Software isn't really going to be roped into this conversation because they're pretty much the head honcho, and anything that's considered Souls-like is really just copying From Software, and they're trying to mimic From Software's gameplay loop. And, From Software, they're okay with this. Like, they've pioneered a new genre of game, but they're not really going to be roped into this discussion because everything that they've made that is considered Souls-like is so well received. And even if you're not a fan of those games, I feel like you can sit back and kind of watch from a distance and be like, yeah, that's really cool. Those games aren't my jam, but I really like what they're doing over there. All right, I that's just my take on From Software. So this is really going to be targeted towards your developers who create games like Lies of P, Lords of the Fallen, Black Myth Wukong. I think is going to be roped into this, and even games like Jedi Survivor and Jedi Fallen Order are enough to be deemed Souls-like, in my opinion, so they're going to get roped into this as well because they play a part in the discussion. So yeah, let's go ahead and continue. So the first thing that really comes to people's minds when they hear the term Souls-like is difficulty, okay? And I really think that there's so much more to the genre than just difficulty. And I mean, yeah, difficulty is part of it, but I don't think difficulty is what makes it special and unique and great, okay? Look at From Software's games, all right? People don't love From Software's core games like Bloodborne, Elden Ring, Dark Souls. They don't love those games because they're hard, all right? Nobody really likes mindlessly hard games. Yes, those games are all really difficult, but those From Software games are super successful because they create a super insane atmosphere. They have an insane art styles, they have crazy build potentials, they have amazing visuals, yada yada, the whole loop, great soundtracks, all of that. That's why people love those games. And I think that is really, really important to note because there's a lot of people out there who think that people who just play Souls-like games are just masochists and they just love difficulty. Like, don't get me wrong, I love a challenge, but if there wasn't any of this special art style or special soundtrack or like special, just if there wasn't any sauce, I wouldn't play it, dude, because I don't like playing mindlessly hard games for no reason. And, what always roped me in with From Software games is like, even as a kid, I would be trying to play these games and I would be struggling so hard, but I just wanted to continue and push through it so I could see what is next in this open world. Bloodborne was my first From Software game, and I was stuck in like the opening area, yet I still persevered and tried because I wanted to see what this world had to offer. It's such a cool idea, and that is what makes Souls-like special, and that is what makes From Software special, and that's really why a lot of their games are home runs, is because of the cool stuff, right? Like, it's not really because of difficulty. Yes, it's a part of it, but a good example of a Souls-like flop, in my opinion, is something like Lords of the Fallen 2023. Now, it wasn't a terrible game, but it just missed the mark on so much of the creativity. Yes, it had things like the Umbral, but like, it wasn't creative enough. It felt like a From Software rip-off game. Whereas something like Black Myth Wukong, it's a pretty challenging game, but once again, it's a really, really interesting world, okay? And that is what I think can kind of separate games into their own category of success. A lot of Souls-like games will be somewhat successful because the genre has gotten popular, but you won't really have massive home run grand slam games like Black Myth Wukong if there's not any creativity, right? Another important factor for a Souls-like game to be, successful in my mind is it has to have creative gameplay mechanics, all right? So like you have like the vanilla Souls game build, okay? Like you have, your bonfires or whatever, you have your flasks, you have your lock-on mechanics, you have your stamina bar, right? Like you have those core mechanics, but then now you need to take your own spin on it, okay? Because From Software is really the only game company that can get away with making vanilla Souls games, right? Because they created it. If there's a Souls-like game that's coming out and it's not made by From Software and it doesn't have any unique twist on the, gameplay mechanics, it's just not really worth people's time. People aren't going to play it. It's probably not going to be, super well received. And I can kind of see why people are mad at the saturation of Souls games in the market, because a lot of the quote unquote Souls like games that have been coming out over the last few years are pretty much just straight up From Software ripoffs, right? Like they have those vanilla mechanics that just don't make it special. But with games like Black Myth Wukong, like it's really sick. I mean, you're watching me in the gameplay here use all these different spells on the boss, and you watch me transform into different creatures. Like it's really really unique and cool. And another game that I think really incorporates this well, that I should use as an example, is the Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor games. Like those games are great, and it's really cool how they took different approaches with the stances and like the force and everything. Like it works really really well. I also want to take a second here to kind of acknowledge the criticisms a lot of people have with the Souls-like genre and a lot of Souls-like games coming out. Um, a lot of people, like, these games aren't for them, right? Like they don't like difficult games. They really just don't like the gameplay loop, and that's completely fine. And I feel like a lot of those people out there who have criticisms with the Souls-like genre, they just don't want it to kind of take over the entire gaming market, right? Like, and I feel like a lot of people have PTSD with free to play battle royales after stuff like Fortnite and PUBG, right? Like, I feel like that is really where, like, that's just kind of a little comparison I make. Is a lot of people feel like that Souls-like games are kind of, they're going to take over the market. I don't really think that's necessarily the case, because we do have a lot of original games coming out, and single player games are really making a comeback. So, there's a lot of potential for new genres there. And obviously, there's a market for people who don't like Souls like games. I guess my main point here is, like, I get the concerns that I've seen online, but I don't think it's anything really too much to worry about. But like, your criticisms are totally valid, right? Because there are a lot of Souls like games that get a lot of praise that are extremely mid, in my opinion. Like Neo games, I just can't get into. I love Souls likes, but those games just aren't for me. That's just an example. So I see where a lot of you guys are coming from, and I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that, right? So let's go ahead and circle back here and answer and talk about the main question. Is the Souls-like genre oversaturated? I'm going to say yes, and here is why, okay? From Software, what they do, like I said before, is great. Anytime they release a Souls game, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be a great experience. But in my opinion, there are really only a handful of non-From Software Souls-like games that really, hit the mark perfectly. Because for a Souls-like game to be good, in my opinion, it has to have a lot of good content to kind of keep you engaged with like the brutal gameplay. All right, like it really does. And I think there's only like 3 or 4 games, like for example Black Myth Wukong, I think falls under that perfectly. Lies of P, another great game, I think can be roped in there. Jedi games, those are great, but they're kind of different because they have difficulty sliders. Whatever, you get my point here. I think that there are a ton of Souls-like games out there that just aren't that great. Like they're okay at best, but they just feel like clones of From Software games. And then you have a handful of games that truly are their own beast and kind of expanded upon the gameplay style that From Software pioneered, right? But I do think that the market for Souls-like genre is really oversaturated, because there's just a lot of Souls-like games nowadays, and like I said, like very few of them are really good. And when you're playing a game that's difficult, like a Souls-like game most of the time is, you want it to be rewarding with crazy content, fantastic soundtracks, like all of that stuff, good lore, you really want it to be worth the struggle to get through. And that's why I think From Software games are special. That's why I think games like Lies of P are special. And, same with like Black Myth Wukong. So overall, yes, I do think that the Souls-like genre is kind of oversaturated. I'm not gonna lie, it is. But that doesn't mean I don't want to see more Souls-like games coming in the future. I just want to see more Souls-like games coming that kind of do their own thing, and they're not just trying to rip on From Software style. That's really the main point of this video. So yeah, if you guys did enjoy this, make sure to drop a like and a subscribe. I'm trying to drop videos all the time while I'm getting through college, so just bear with me. I don't have a schedule yet, but hopefully we'll work with one soon. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.